Welcome to Mythos AI, your source for Cliff's Notes on complex subjects. Join Anna and Phil for yet another engaging conversation.
Welcome. Today we're taking a deep dive into the relationship between China and Taiwan. It's a complex situation with deep historical roots and a lot of global implications. It impacts your life more than you might realize. We'll explore how this conflict, which might seem distant, actually affects you. It affects everything from the tech you use to the stability of global order.
To really understand the tension, we need to go back to the Chinese Civil War.
Okay.
That war ended in 1949 with the Kuomintang, also known as the KMT, fleeing to Taiwan after they were defeated.
Right.
So this created two separate entities, the People's Republic of China, or PRC, on the mainland, led by the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, and the Republic of China, or ROC, in Taiwan under the KMT. Both claim to be the legitimate government of China.
So essentially two Chinas.
Exactly. And this split was driven by a huge ideological gap. The CCP had its communist vision, while the KMT focused on nationalism. This set the stage for decades of tension.
That historical context is key for understanding the situation today. The Civil War's legacy, the separate governments, and the unresolved one China question all still loom large over the relationship between Beijing and Taipei.
Absolutely. And then in 1971, things got even more complicated. The UN, through Resolution 2758, recognized the People's Republic of China as the only representative of China. So Taiwan was essentially excluded from the international stage.
Wow.
This had a huge impact on Taiwan. They were barred from participating in key global organizations like the World Health Organization.
Right.
This has very real consequences. It limits Taiwan's ability to engage in global affairs and cooperate on crucial issues. This was especially clear during events like the COVID-19 pandemic.
So think about it this way. Taiwan, with its over 23 million people and thriving democracy, is often left out of vital global discussions, even when those issues directly impact the health and safety of its people. This exclusion, rooted in the One China policy and the history of the Chinese Civil War, continues to shape Taiwan's situation today.
Now, if we fast forward to today, Taiwan's modern identity adds another layer to all of this. Over the past few decades, Taiwan has gone through an incredible economic transformation.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
It went from an agricultural economy to a global leader in technology, particularly in the semiconductor industry.
Right.
Companies like TSMC, which stands for Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, are essential for producing the advanced microchips that power just about everything. Smartphones, computers, cars, even military equipment.
I think most people listening probably have a device with a Taiwanese chip in it right now. That's how important Taiwan is to the global tech industry. And this reliance on Taiwan for such a crucial technology adds a whole other dimension to the China-Taiwan relationship, making it a global concern, not just a regional one.
Along with their economic rise, Taiwan also went through a major political shift. They transitioned into a vibrant democracy.
A stark contrast to mainland China.
Exactly. Taiwan has a strong electoral system, free press, and active civil society. This is completely different from mainland China's authoritarian rule under the CCP. This difference in governance makes the relationship even more complicated. It highlights the contrasting political realities across the Taiwan Strait.
It's striking to think about. On one side, you have a society where people can freely express themselves, vote for their leaders, and hold them accountable. That's the reality in Taiwan. And this very freedom, this democratic way of life, is at the heart of the tensions with Beijing. They see Taiwan's autonomy as a direct challenge to their one China principle.
And this difference in governance, along with the rise of a Taiwanese identity, especially among the younger generation, further complicates the relationship with Beijing.
Yeah, I can see how that would add fuel to the fire.
For many in Taiwan, especially those born after martial law ended in 1987, their identity is primarily Taiwanese, not Chinese. This growing sense of a separate identity, distinct from mainland China, poses a significant challenge to Beijing's goal of reunification.
This cultural and generational shift is really crucial for understanding the dynamics at play here. The people of Taiwan, especially the younger generation, have never lived under CCP rule. Their experiences, their values, their aspirations are often completely different from those on the mainland.
Now, to fully grasp the complexities of the China-Taiwan relationship, we have to look at it from Beijing's perspective.
Right. Understanding both sides is crucial.
The One China principle is a cornerstone of Beijing's foreign policy. They assert that there is only one sovereign state called China, and Taiwan is a part of it. a breakaway province that must eventually be reunified with the mainland by force if necessary.
A pretty strong stance.
Absolutely. This principle is deeply ingrained in Chinese nationalism, and it shapes Beijing's diplomatic strategies on a global scale. It forces countries to cut off official ties with Taiwan if they want to establish diplomatic relations with China. This approach effectively isolates Taiwan on the world stage, limiting their ability to engage in formal diplomacy and participate in international organizations.
So, to put it into perspective, imagine every country you wanted to work with made you cut ties with a close friend. That's the kind of pressure the One China principle puts on countries that want to work with Beijing.
Precisely. This policy severely restricts Taiwan's diplomatic space, making it extremely difficult for them to build formal relationships with other nations.
Beyond the politics and ideology, Taiwan's strategic importance also plays a major role in China's perspective.
Yes, geographically, Taiwan sits near essential shipping lanes that handle a significant portion of global maritime trade. This makes Taiwan crucial for regional and global security.
It's worth noting that the Taiwan Strait, the body of water separating mainland China and Taiwan, is one of the busiest shipping routes in the world. A huge amount of global trade, including things like electronics, oil, and raw materials, passes through that strait. This makes Taiwan's location incredibly important, not just for China, but for the global economy.
If China were to gain control of Taiwan, it would give them a huge strategic advantage. It would allow them to project their power into the Pacific, control those key shipping lanes, and enhance their military reach.
So the stakes are incredibly high.
Domestically, the Taiwan issue is directly tied to the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party. The CCP often uses nationalist rhetoric around reunification to bolster its standing, especially during times of economic or political instability.
It's a way to rally the people.
Exactly. State media consistently paints Taiwan's leaders as separatists trying to undermine Chinese unity. They frame the issue as a matter of national pride and a core interest of the Chinese people.
So for the CCP, controlling the narrative around Taiwan is vital. By portraying Taiwan as an inseparable part of China, they tap into nationalist sentiment and reinforce their own legitimacy.
This narrative is constantly being pushed through public events, education campaigns, and media coverage in mainland China.
All designed to drum up support for their policies.
Yes. They emphasize Taiwan's historical and cultural links to the mainland, hoping to rally domestic support and deflect attention from any internal challenges the party might be facing.
Now let's shift our focus to Taiwan's perspective. Despite not having widespread international recognition as a sovereign state, Taiwan operates as a de facto independent entity.
Right. They have their own government, their own military, their own constitution.
And this de facto independence is a source of pride for many Taiwanese and the basis of their resistance to unification.
Taiwan actively participates in international trade agreements. They're a member of the World Trade Organization. They take part in international cultural and sporting events. These activities highlight their unique identity and operational independence despite their lack of diplomatic recognition.
But they also live under the constant threat from China.
That's right. And that threat has grown in recent years.
China has significantly increased its military presence near the island. We see regular incursions into Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ, by Chinese military aircraft, including advanced fighter jets and surveillance planes. It's a clear signal that Beijing is willing to use force.
Think of the ADZ as a buffer zone around Taiwan. When Chinese military aircraft enter that zone without permission, it's seen as a direct threat, an attempt to intimidate and challenge Taiwan's sovereignty.
And Taiwan hasn't just stood by passively. They've been actively strengthening their defense capabilities in response to these escalating threats.
That's right. They've increased their defense spending, focusing on acquiring advanced weapon systems, building up their cyber defenses, and developing asymmetric warfare strategies. They're leveraging their strengths, like their mountainous terrain and technological advantages, to counter China's military might.
They're also trying to strengthen their military partnerships.
Exactly. Especially with the United States. Taiwan depends on arms sales and joint training exercises to bolster its defenses. And while they don't have formal diplomatic relations with most countries, they maintain strong informal ties with key players like the United States, Japan, and European nations.
These informal relationships are a lifeline for Taiwan. They provide access to diplomatic support, economic cooperation, and military assistance, all without formal recognition.
It's a delicate balancing act, but essential for Taiwan's survival.
Now let's turn our attention to the United States and their role in this complex geopolitical game.
The U.S. has maintained a policy of strategic ambiguity when it comes to Taiwan.
A very carefully calculated approach.
Yes, it involves balancing their commitment to Taiwan's defense, as laid out in the Taiwan Relations Act, with their adherence to the One China policy. The goal is to deter Chinese aggression without directly engaging in military conflict.
So it's like walking a tightrope. They want to support Taiwan without provoking Beijing into taking drastic action. It's a delicate balancing act that has been the cornerstone of U.S. policy towards Taiwan for decades.
And this policy has shaped their response to several critical incidents in the region. For example, during the 1995-1996 Taiwan Strait crisis, when China conducted missile tests near Taiwan, the U.S. deployed naval forces to the area as a show of force.
A clear message.
More recently, U.S. naval patrols in the Taiwan Strait have become a regular occurrence. It shows their commitment to Taiwan's security.
These patrols, coupled with regular arms sales to Taiwan, are designed to signal American support and act as a deterrent against potential Chinese aggression.
The U.S. is Taiwan's primary arms supplier. They provide Taiwan with advanced weapons systems to bolster their defense capabilities. Of course, these arms sales often draw sharp criticism from Beijing, who see it as a violation of the One China policy and a provocation that destabilizes the region.
It's a delicate balance, for sure.
It's important to remember that while the U.S. has a strong security relationship with Taiwan, they also engage in diplomatic efforts to prevent things from escalating. They want to manage the risks inherent in this complex situation.
Trying to keep the peace.
Exactly. The U.S. wants to keep open lines of communication with Beijing to prevent misunderstandings and miscalculations that could lead to conflict.
So it's not just about military posturing. They're trying to work through diplomatic channels as well.
Beyond their direct relationship with Taiwan, the U.S. also collaborates with allies in the Indo-Pacific region to counter China's growing influence.
Strength in numbers.
Right. They conduct joint military exercises, like the Rim of the Pacific or Unpacking exercises. These showcase the strength and coordination of these alliances.
And who participates in these exercises?
Countries like Japan, South Korea, Australia, and others, they present a united front against potential threats in the region.
So it's not just a military alliance.
No, these alliances extend to economic partnerships as well. For example, there's the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, known as the Quad.
I've heard of that.
It includes the U.S., India, Japan, and Australia. Their goal is to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific, which directly challenges China's growing economic and political influence.
So the U.S. is building a network of partnerships to counter China's rise.
Exactly. They're also engaged in bilateral trade agreements and initiatives with countries in the region, trying to bolster economic resilience and reduce reliance on China's supply chains. These collaborations demonstrate how important alliances are in deterring Chinese expansionism and maintaining a stable balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. So looking ahead, the future of this conflict is full of uncertainty and risk. There are several possible scenarios, each with its own implications for regional stability and global security. One possibility is peaceful unification.
That seems unlikely, at least in the short term.
Right. It remains a long-term goal for China, but the reality on the ground suggests something different. China's becoming more assertive, their military capabilities are expanding, and there's strong resistance to unification in Taiwan. All of this points to the status quo becoming more fragile. The risk of military conflict is a serious concern.
What other scenarios are we looking at?
Another possibility is a gradual escalation of tensions. This could lead to a more confrontational relationship between China and Taiwan, with increased military activities, economic pressure, and diplomatic maneuvering. It's all aimed at weakening Taiwan's international standing and forcing them to accept unification on Beijing's terms.
And of course, we can't forget about the role of major powers like the United States.
Absolutely. The U.S. has a long-standing commitment to supporting Taiwan's defense. They've indicated a willingness to intervene militarily if China attacks.
But their policy of strategic ambiguity makes things tricky.
It does. That ambiguity leaves some uncertainty about the extent of their commitment. It creates the potential for miscalculations by both China and Taiwan. It's hard to predict how things might unfold in a crisis because of that uncertainty.
Could mediation play a role? Could international organizations or neutral parties step in?
It's possible, but there are significant obstacles. China sees Taiwan as an internal matter. They've always rejected any attempts at international intervention.
And Taiwan?
Taiwan welcomes international support. They want to raise awareness of the threats they face from China. However, their diplomatic isolation and China's influence within international organizations make those efforts less effective.
So their hands are somewhat tied. What about the economic relationship between China and Taiwan? Could that help stabilize the situation?
There's potential there. Both sides have a lot to lose if conflict disrupts trade and damages their economies.
Taiwan is a key supplier of semiconductors and other high-tech products to China.
And China is Taiwan's biggest trading partner. So there are strong incentives for cooperation, and that could potentially discourage both sides from taking actions that would jeopardize their economic interests.
But the strategic rivalry between China and the U.S. could complicate things.
It's a major factor. Taiwan's increasingly important in that rivalry, and that could overshadow economic considerations. China sees Taiwan as a key part of their national rejuvenation strategy, a stepping stone to regional dominance.
And the U.S.?
The U.S. sees Taiwan as a democratic ally, a crucial defense against Chinese expansionism. So this strategic competition could push both sides towards a more confrontational approach, increasing the risk of conflict even if it hurts them economically.
So what needs to happen to reach a peaceful resolution?
It'll take substantial compromises from both sides. And a favorable international environment wouldn't hurt. China needs to acknowledge Taiwan's distinct identity and their desire for democracy. They have to stop using military threats and coercion.
And Taiwan?
Taiwan has to address China's security concerns. They need to find ways to engage in productive dialogue without giving up their sovereignty and democratic principles.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act.
It is. And the international community needs to play a more active role. They need to facilitate dialogue, promote measures that build trust, and deter any attempts to resolve this through force. The stakes are incredibly high, and the risks are substantial. The decisions made by China, Taiwan, and other major players in the coming years will have a huge impact on regional security, global stability, and the future of democracy in Asia.
This deep dive has highlighted just how complex and crucial the China-Taiwan relationship is. It's a situation that demands careful attention, nuanced understanding, and a commitment to finding peaceful solutions. What happens in the Taiwan Strait doesn't just affect that region, it affects the entire world. This isn't just a regional issue, it's a global concern that will shape the world for years to come.
Thanks for listening to Mythos AI. Stay tuned for more concise insights. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future episodes.